to order the Township Planning Board meeting for May 10th, 2018. Eileen, opening statement, please.
Thank you. I hereby declare this meeting of the Howell Township Planning Board to be open. Adequate notice having been given pursuant to the New Jersey Open Public Meeting Act in the following manner. First, on January 19, 2018, a copy of said notice was mailed to the Star-Ledger and the Tri-Town News. Second, on January 19, 2018, a copy of said notice was hand-delivered to the clerk of the Township of Howell. Third, on January 19, 2018, said notice was posted in the office of the Planning Board and on the bulletin board in the Howell Township Municipal Building, 4567 Route 9, Howell Township, New Jersey. In accordance with the Fire Prevention Code and your safety, please be advised that this facility is designed with 2 emergency exits, which are on your right at the front and rear of the meeting room. Furthermore, smoking is not permitted in the municipal building. Please take note that this meeting is being videotaped for possible future broadcast on Howell Township TV 77.
Thank you, Eileen.
You're
Roll call,
welcome.
please.
Former Mayor Gatto.
Yes, present.
Mr. Husser is excused. Chief Kudrick.
Here.
Mr. Russo is excused. Mr. Schneider.
Here.
Mr. Seaman.
Here.
Mr. Boyle is excused. Deputy Mayor Nicastro is excused. Mayor Berger is excused. Chairman Nash is excused. And Vice Chairman Tannenhouse will be replacing him. So Chairman Tannenhouse.
Yes. Here.
And you have a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we could all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence for all of our first responders and all of our military serving abroad. Chief?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Okay. Eileen, do we have any minutes?
Yes, we have minutes from April 5th. Eligible voters would be former Mayor Gatto and yourself.
Okay.
Sorry.
For Mayor Gatto, how do you?
In all honesty, I did not review those minutes.
Okay, so want
I
to
can
carry
carry
them?
him to the next
Yeah,
meeting.
would you mind doing
Okay.
that?
No
Sorry.
problem.
Okay. Do we have any vouchers?
We have no vouchers.
Do we have any correspondence?
Yes, we do. We have. First of all, there was an email that was sent from the chairman after some back and forth. We were supposed to have a training session next week at our meeting, and that meeting has now been canceled because we have nothing on the agenda, so we figured rather than bring everybody in just for training, we'll do it at another date. We were going to discuss it at this meeting. I don't know if you still want to discuss it and pick another date, or if you want to put that off as well. It's up to you.
I don't see any reason to put it off. Just what's the next available date?
Our next meeting date is June 7th. We have 2 subdivisions on for that night, both preliminary.
What date is it?
June 7th. That would be our next meeting date.
I'm good.
What's the scope of the training?
So just briefly, I think a couple board members had suggested they wanted the professionals to just kind of go through general type stuff that we look at, and like proofs you're supposed to be looking for, specific sections, what's a variance, what's a design waiver. So it's kind of like an educational.
Yeah, we have a lot of new
Yeah, that's a good idea.
new
Okay.
members and
And they talked
With-
about starting it at 5:30, and then we go right into the meeting from that, so
Yeah, as long as you're buying dinner, I don't care.
I'm not buying dinner. I thought you were bringing
We'll
dinner.
get pizza. We'll figure that out.
Okay. Okay, so we'll make it for June 7th?
thank you.
Or grilled chicken. Grilled chicken. Pizza.
Or he wants grilled chicken on his pizza.
That'll work. Grilled chicken on a pizza.
So June 7th is good.
June 7th is our next official meeting. Yes.
Okay.
All right, back to correspondences.
We also have two ordinances, which I sent to everybody with the links. And we actually talked about them a little bit at the last meeting, but we didn't have a chance to read them. One is about the special assessment bond ordinance for Freewood Acres, and the other one is the special assessment bond ordinance for Route 9. And we need to determine whether they are consistent with the master plan, so we can send them to the clerk, because they are voting on them for adoption at their meeting of May 15th.
Okay. How does the board want to?
I reviewed both of them, and I believe they're consistent with the intent of the master plan and would make a motion accordingly.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you.
Roll call, please.
Is that for both? We'll just take one roll
Yes,
call
it's...
for both? Thank you.
For both, yep.
Former Mayor Gatto?
Yes.
Chief Kudrick?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Seaman?
Yes.
And Chairman Tannenhouse?
Yes.
Thank you. Other than that, I have no other correspondence. But just an aside, I did leave you a copy of the resolution for Howell Family Apartments. I sent it out late today, which is when we got it. I don't know if you guys want to postpone voting on it right now. Maybe we can take a break and everybody can review it, because we don't really want to hold it till June 7th. We don't have to. And there are some changes which I can go over with you.
Everybody in agreement to that?
I do have some questions about it, though.
Okay.
So I did read it. You said you have additional changes in addition to what we already received?
Yes.
Okay.
A lot of them are just typos or corrections. but
Okay.
We can go through it if you want, so.
I just had general questions about it. Maybe this is part of the education process, but since there's one pending and it's kind of an important one, I thought that there was a lot of conversation that took place that I didn't necessarily see in the resolution. And I know that public comments were somewhat paraphrased, if that's the right word, but I do remember a lot of comments from individual board members that I didn't see. Is that normal, or maybe can you speak to what the intent of what the resolution is? The approval with all the things subject to were very clear, so I get that. So
Yeah, ordinarily, because board members aren't tested,
It's not on here, that little gray button there.
okay, let's get that one. Ordinarily, because board members are not testifying, and they're not providing testimony in support or against, so ordinarily, board colloquies are not summarized in the resolutions. Usually, the attorneys who are speaking, they're experts, members of the public, but ordinarily, board discussions, if there's a particular issue that's germane to the decision, that'll be addressed, but it won't say, former Mayor Gatto said this, and Chief Henry said that. That's ordinarily not in a resolution.
I understand. And why is there no record of how the vote was taken place that night? There's no record in the resolution, unless I missed it, of who made the motion and who voted.
That goes after it doesn't go in there, it's just who memorializes it. When it's memorialized tonight, the members that are eligible to vote would be listed on here as yes or no,
So we have a record of who memorializes the resolution, but...
and I have a record of who voted for it.
Okay,
And only the people that voted for it are allowed to vote, so they would be on here, like tonight, if there's a member that voted for it that isn't here, they would go down as absent on the resolution.
right, but in that case, then there wouldn't be a record of who actually, if they were here to vote on the approval, there's no record of that.
No, there is. So, if my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, a resolution summarizes the board's action. I don't know that it necessarily specifies who made the motion to approve and who seconded that. What it does in the resolution is it just takes how the members voted on the resolution. The resolution memorializes a decision. Eileen tracks who made the motion, who seconded it, and how the vote went.
Okay,
But there's nothing to prevent the resolution from identifying who made the motion, who seconded it. You can include it. You can
Okay.
include it or not include it. That's not mandatory, but you could.
I think there's sometimes that if we're not going to do that every time, I get that. In this particular case, because of the issues that surrounded that application, I would request that that is part of that resolution. And this is, I'm not playing politics, that's not it, but there was, anytime that we have a large public outcry on an application and large amounts of people attend, I think we owe it to the public to put our names on who voted which way.
Okay. That's fine. We'll take it up with, and then it can be amended. And it can still be memorialized tonight with that amendment
Okay.
if you want. Just one other item too, and I think, Brian, I think you did answer it, and so did Mr. Seaman, about the circulation element, so that is good to go the way it was presented from CME, correct?
If you only need 2 of the 3 decision makers, yes.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, great. So we'll
So do
start.
we need to vote on that one?
Well,
Or are you getting to that?
we'll get to it. I don't know if everybody else has had an opportunity to read it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Take 5 minutes to, we can either take 5 minutes now and read it, or
Or
go
at the
through
end
the
of the meeting.
applications and deal with it at the end.
I say we don't let these people be delayed.
Okay, so we'll deal with this resolution at the end. We'll deal with all the other we can deal with all the other resolutions except for this one. Okay? Okay. For resolution case number SP-1035, we have eligible voters, Mr. Snyder, Mr. Seaman. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion to memorialize case number SP 1035.
I second.
Okay, roll call?
Mr. Schneider,
Yes,
Mr. Seaman,
Yes.
thank you. Resolution's memorialized.
Okay. Next resolution is for case number SP-1042. Eligible voters are former Mayor Gatto and myself.
I make a motion to memorialize the resolution granting submission waivers for case number SP 1042.
And I'll second. Roll call?
Mr. Gatto?
Yes.
Mr.
Yes.
Chairman Tannenhouse?
Yes.
Resolution's memorialized.
Okay, next resolution is for case number SD-2973. Eligible voters are former Mayor Gatto and myself.
I make a motion to approve the resolution granting an extension of time for case number SD 2973.
I'll second. Roll call?
Mr. Gatto?
Yes.
Chairman Tannenhouse?
Yes.
Resolution's
This
memorialized.
is funny.
I should have just lumped these 3 all together. Next resolution is for case number SP-1041. Eligible voters are former Mayor Gatto and myself.
I make a motion to approve the resolution as written granting minor site plan approval for case number SP 1041.
Roll call?
Did you want a second first?
Oh, sorry, second.
Thank you. Mr. Gatto,
Yes.
former Mayor Gatto?
Yes.
And Chairman Tannenhouse?
Yes.
Resolution's memorialized. Thank you.
Okay. Next resolution is going to be for case number SP-1043CR. Eligible voters are Mr. Kudrick, or Chief Kudrick, Mr. Schneider, Mr. Seaman, and myself. Do I have a motion?
I make a motion to memorialize case number SP 1043CR.
Okay,
I second.
okay. Roll call?
Chief Kudrick?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes,
Mr. Seaman?
Yes.
And Chairman Tannenhouse?
Yes.
Resolution's memorialized. Thank you.
Okay, so we will hold case number SP-1039 until after the application today. Eileen, do we have any submission waivers?
No submission waivers.
All right, the first application before the board is case number SP-1027, 41 Randolph LLC. All members present are eligible.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Salvatore Alfieri, Cleary, Giacobbe, Alfieri, and Jacobs on behalf of the applicant. We were here in
March.
March, wow. We were here in March. At that time, several issues were raised by the board members. We've had an opportunity to attempt to address the bigger concerns that the board members raised, particularly former Mayor Gatto regarding fire.
Wait, I'm sorry, guys. We going to have to hold the meeting for a second. Mr. Schneider needs a
Okay.
5-minute recess. Sorry, Mr. Alfieri.
That's fine.
Actually, while you're doing that,
New Jersey American Water, yeah.
just let them know.
These things help you?
What's that?
Do they help you?
Just call Tommy and let him know.
I can't remember, I do it that night, because I can't remember anything anymore, because there's so much shit going on. Oh, that's what, like, even for this one, I had to send that email just for my own record. I've been doing that
was a
now,
quick-
because you're one of
Quick break.
the few attorneys that
Okay,
I get something like this from, so, very helpful.
we're ready to convene. Mr. Schneider has returned.
Thank you.
Please,
So,
Mr. Alfieri.
Patrick Ward, who was our engineer and planner, has been sworn and qualified. This is probably the third night of hearings on this application. And I'm going to ask him to update you on a couple of the things that we've done since the last hearing. And Mr. Ward, you understand you're still under oath?
I do.
First, as it relates to at least the initial application proposed well water, since that time you've had an opportunity to discuss the availability of water with New Jersey American Water, is that correct?
That's correct.
And what did they advise you?
So we engaged the local regional manager for New Jersey American Water about this site, and we know about the potential for other developments in the industrial zone here along Randolph Road. So first we asked the question, can they serve this property? And then obviously it becomes an economical decision because there are other developments that may be following down the road. The simple answer from New Jersey American Water was yes, we could connect to the 547 main that was installed. We do have a service availability letter from New Jersey American Water confirming that. I have extra copies here. And so with that, the proposal for not only our domestic water, but our fire suppression water will be a physical water connection in Randolph Road. So, and we weren't able to revise the plans as such to indicate that in advance of this meeting, but moving forward with the next plan revision, that'll indicate, there will be two things. One, where the physical connection to the building will be, but also where the physical connection to that intersection will be, because we have off-site improvements, so there'll be an expansion to the plan set.
So if the board were to approve this application, they can condition it upon there being actual water service from New Jersey American Water and no well water?
Correct.
All right, I'm just confused, if I could just briefly, just, because this letter says this is not a will-serve letter, and it says, pretty specifically, they don't have water mains on the property. I mean, there's a bold part, it says it should be noted that service would not be able to be provided until such time that the new main in Lakewood Farmingdale Road is fully in service.
Correct.
So you're going to be extending water main.
We're extending that, well, yes, it'll be a new water main in Randolph Road, but yes, an extension of that water main from 547. The applicant is well aware of the timing of that main that was recently installed in this particular location, obviously it keeps going, and the timing of when that'll actually become active. So,
You understand, should the board act favorably, that that would be a condition of the approval, that in the event that New Jersey American did not provide service or the main was not extended, that would void out that approval?
yes, and again, the applicant's well aware of that as well.
And the second,
Can we enter this as an exhibit?
yes, that would be A28?
A28.
Right, so, yes, and the applicant has reviewed and analyzed the cost associated with the running of that line and is prepared to incur that cost to run it to the site. So that was point one. Second point that came up at the last hearing was that Jim Herman did a memo relating to, from the township engineer point of view, and the board wanted us to confirm that we could address all of those comments to his satisfaction, and you've had an opportunity to review that. That memo is dated
December 6, 2016.
right, and you've had an opportunity to review that memo, and we will address all of those comments?
Yeah, and there's 13 items, and we have addressed all of them in some fashion on our set of plans. The only one that has not been addressed to date, but our office has at least explored, knowing full well that we have to address it in the future, is the 2,000-foot downstream analysis. And just to comment on that, nothing formal has been submitted, but part of when we investigated the flood hazard area at the rear of the site, we looked at the method of determining that flood hazard area, which is called the approximation method, and the DEP verified the same. As you go 2,000 feet downstream, the defined channel or the depth of that stream in the back, Dix Brook, is well below any real improvements along that 2,000-foot downstream line. So in our office's eyes, we have confidence that there are no impacts for the 2,000-foot downstream analysis in accordance with how the ordinance specifies how that should be done. And again, as a future or potential condition of an approval, we would have to prove that to Mr. Herman and the board's professionals.
And the third point was another point that was raised by former Mayor Gatto, and that's relating to the parking. And we do have a traffic engineer here who we'll get to it at some point, but the parking as it relates to uses such as manufacturing and other uses that are permitted in the zone, we've provided in our parking count that we would have 20% office, 80% warehouse, and that we have adequate parking for that combination. We acknowledge, and we've been through this with you on this application previously, that we don't have any tenants yet. So, and we understand, the applicant understands that any user that comes to this site, and there'll be multiple tenants most likely, would have to meet with the zoning officer and demonstrate that we have adequate parking for that specific use. So all we could say as it relates to those uses are that number one, that there'll be permitted uses in the zone, and that number two, that the site will meet the parking standards of the ordinance. Therefore, we can't represent anything more than that today. We may, for example, have a warehouse use or another use that doesn't have 20% office, and therefore we would pick up space for something else, or one space may have 30% office and one would have 10, but in the end, the balance of parking has to work where we meet the ordinance. I think, well, those were I think the three major issues we tried to address for you. We have to obviously get to traffic again, but I'm not sure if there's another question that the board members have that we didn't.
I think another major issue was about the power lines.
Okay.
And the height above and what would be the maximum sag versus, my understanding is former Mayor Gatto here, it's his fire department that has to respond to this site and his concern with a ladder truck.
So, and Mr. Ward, since the last meeting, you discussed, you met with someone from the town, the fire official.
Chief Lewis, yes.
Chief Lewis, and you also discussed that issue with him and site circulation?
Yeah, so I met with Mr. Lewis on March 27th, and we went through his initial review letter, which we addressed his comments on that, and the latest site plan. And he had no further comment. He felt that there was enough room around the building for the apparatus. He actually detailed the width of the apparatus, including the stabilization legs. So coming out of that, that was the feedback we had, and he had not issued any other memos in review of this latest site plan. But what we also did at the board's request was take a further look at the location of the wires, and in intense, I was really peppering my JCP&L contacts that I've been dealing with on the project, looking for certain answers that the board was asking. And ironically enough, one came back as I was on my way here. That was the electromagnetic frequency from the wires, which is basically, is there any ill health effects from the wires? I think that was something that was mentioned. The JCP&L, First Energy Corp., they have literature that says that there are no adverse health effects due to the electromagnetic frequencies from these high-tension towers and the wires associated with them to the public on the ground. And I could share that with the board secretary. I just got emailed a PDF. It's some of their literature. There was another request for, and I have this as another exhibit, Mr. Alfieri, that the First Energy's right-of-way requirements for design. And this was the very first document that JCP&L gave us to start the design of the project. Very basic requirements that they have in there. And like I've testified to at the last meeting, I've been in a constant dialogue with Michael Espinoza, who's the regional project manager for JCP&L in this area. The latest email I have from him, and this isn't a formal letter of intent or even an approval, but I have an email with me that says that preliminarily the building layout's acceptable and most of the site details. So that's the best they're going to do at this point until we have either an approval from the municipality or not. And I could share that with the board if you'd like.
Before you move off that, the document we just turned in, which is dated, which is 8/29.
Yes.
Could you just, again, identify what this document is, please?
So it's published by First Energy. It's the high voltage transmission right-of-way restrictions, and that's what we have on our property. They start with, keeping open access for all personnel, vehicles and equipment, and then they have the restrictions in the right-of-way, location of ground disturbance and excavations. Any structures are not permitted in the right-of-way. Protective barriers, if there's anything within 15 feet of the poles. Vegetation has a maximum height. No material storage or combustible liquids, etc. No septic systems, and no kite flying, model airplane flying, or similar activities. And then at the very end, it talks about exceptions to any policy, and the only exception we're looking for is the very shallow ground disturbance for grading and pavement, which they haven't had issues with to date, in the immediate vicinity of the towers. One last item for the JCP&L that the board brought up was the distances from the so there's two distances. Horizontally, on the plan view, distance from the edge of the building to the wires. At the closest point, the distance from, it's actually the northeast corner, is 51.78 feet horizontally, okay? The elevation of the wires at that tower on that northeast corner, and from let me preface this next statement by explaining, how we went about trying to get the best number for the board. The first question I asked to JCP&L was, what are the safety issues? The second one was, do you have any information about the heights, the locations, any of that of the wires? Without getting any good responses, we had the surveyor of record for the property go back to the property and shoot the physical locations and the elevations of the wires as they hit the tower, because if you see a sag in a wire, it's very difficult to survey without actually getting very close to the wire the exact low point of the wires. And I think JCP&L is the only group that would have that information, so I haven't gotten that to date. But what we were able to shoot was the connection point on each tower and the elevation of those wires, the lowest wires. So at the northeast corner of the building, the wire elevation is 125.5. So for reference, grade at the building on the northeast corner is 58. Okay, so it's just under 50 feet up in the air from the edge of the building. The building elevations, which is another item that the board asked for, the first floor, or the slab elevation of the building is going to be 62. The eave on that east side of the building is at elevation 86. So again, from that elevation 125, you're about 40 feet down to the eave, and you're about 50 feet plus horizontal. I believe those were the two big numbers that the board were looking for at the last meeting. I think that's all I have to share from JCP&L, unless if we want to pass around the emails, but they're emails from the regional project manager.
That's all we have.
I get it. So I get all those numbers. So can you speak to that horizontal distance with trucks in the loading bays?
In terms of like tractor trailers, like the trailers?
Because your distances horizontally went from the wire to the face of the building. So what is that distance if you subtract the length that you gave a number from the face of the building to the wire? That makes the assumption that the fire department can get to the face of the building. I don't think that they can because that's a loading dock area with trailers. So I think the real number we need is what's the distance from the edge of a truck to the wires?
It depends on the truck. I mean, there's anything from a 50-foot trail, I mean, if there could be a 50-foot trailer there, in all honesty, and that, this site can accommodate that.
So
Is that the trailer, or is that the cab to the end of the trailer?
That could be, you know, that's a good point, hang on.
well, either way,
Well, it could have a cab on the trailer. I
right,
guess would be the worst case.
so if the loading bays are filled, and I'm sure you'll provide some testimony as to whether that would actually happen or not, but if the loading bays were filled, there is no access because a 50-foot trailer, you said you're 50 feet away, the wires would be right above the face of the truck.
Correct. So there was one, in my meeting with Chief Lewis, one of the items that I did bring up was the concerns of the board. And one of the solutions I offered was, so on our plan here, in between the loading dock doors, there's a striped area that's really for no parking. My proposal to Chief Lewis was to expand that to 25, 30 feet in two locations and move some of the overhead doors. He said it wasn't necessary, so he stopped me when I got to that point. It's something if the board chooses, and the applicant, again, this is something that I did broach with the applicant as well, because after the last meeting, we went through everything that was discussed. That would provide a lane, and it would be striped for a fire lane, direct access to that east face of the building. I do want to just mention that there, in my opinion, there's adequate access to the other three sides of the building, and it will be fully sprinklered. So, but if we need, you know, that's one of those things, if we need to shift the overhead doors to allow for a access lane directly to the face of the building of a certain width, we're willing to do that. That's something the applicant's willing to do.
So if I remember correctly, the way we had the conversation was to make a determination and again, I'm going to be that guy, but if I had to direct fire apparatus onto this site, what areas could I use? And you haven't given me anything to tell me that I would be able to use anything on the entire east side of the building because the fire doesn't know where those lanes are, right? So
Mayor Gatto, when I spoke to Chief Lewis about this issue, he expressed similar response to what the engineer is saying, but he said it's your fire department that has to respond, and he would defer to you,
Okay.
and whatever would work best for you, because you're the one that has to respond to it.
Okay. So I don't think that you've shown anything to me to tell me that anything has changed on the east side of the building. I think the same comment I made last time is the same comment I'm going to make again. I would never position an aerial device on the entire east side of the building. And I think you said something a little interesting. You said that your surveyor can't get near the wires, so there's no way a fire department aerial truck is going to get near those wires.
There's OSHA setbacks from every overhead wire,
I get it.
so we have to follow those.
Fire departments comply with OSHA too.
No, I know, I'm not sure, yeah, it's a statement I have to make.
I get it. So I don't think anything, in all honesty, has changed in that part of the conversation unless you have something else to offer. So that gets me to the rest of the sides of the building, which we started to talk about. So I don't see where anything has changed there either. That west side of the building still appears to be an ingress and egress. I just still don't see where that's adequate room with vehicles that could be going in and out of there to tell me that at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, fire apparatus can get up and down that driveway.
I would comment to that we meet the ordinance requirement for width of driveway, and it'll be striped and signed accordingly to say fire lane, no parking. So in my opinion, and without getting further comment from Chief Lewis, I don't know, besides that offering a 40-foot wide driveway, which is in excess of what the ordinance minimum is, what else we could do there. I think the Randolph Road side, I think we're okay. I think the west side and the north side, I think we meet the ordinance fully. And based on what and again, I have to defer to my conversation with Chief Lewis as well, because he reviews this as part of the site plan procedure, but he had no comment, and with that, that's where I have to hang my hat on, at least to a point, with his comments, because if he has a comment, or again, like the board wanted us to investigate certain things, we did. If he had further comment, we'd absolutely investigate it and not try to push the envelope. So that would be my response. We have truck turning templates throughout the site that verify that the specific equipment used by the township does maneuver. Now, I think, Mr. Mayor Gatto, you mentioned that if there was a rogue car parked somewhere, particularly on the east side around the towers, the only thing we can do as an applicant or as the site engineer is stripe or no parking fire lane. And, the minimum, as you see on the site plan submission, is every, I'm just shooting from the hip here, every 100 feet or so, put the big text. There might be certain areas on here where it warrants a full, gore striping of that area so no one double parks there, particularly around building corners or even on that east side. And I think that's, again, something the applicant will be very willing to do, if that helps.
What's the aisle width on the two sides?
We maintain 30 feet everywhere. So that was one thing that we were able to correct as part of the evolution of this project. So that's no longer a waiver request.
What's the aisle width that makes you comfortable?
You have a building that has a configuration on all sides. I just don't practically see where all fire apparatus would go up and down the western driveway and make assumptions that there will be no vehicle there at any time trying to come in and out of that property. If one vehicle, one truck, whatever, one anything is coming through there, which they could, it's not, to me, it's not an issue of parking, it's an issue of ingress and egress. So if a vehicle is there, first of all, we're already limiting how many sides of the building that we could use, which is never a good thing. But the one side that does appear adequate, because there is an adequate aisle width, I'm not arguing that, it's vehicles. If there's a vehicle coming down that side of that building as we're going in, that's a problem.
And I understand that. I'm not sure how fair that is to judge the application based on if there is a traveling vehicle when we provide the necessary widths for the ordinance. I mean, it's a good point. It's a very good point. But when you look at it, we as the applicant's professionals, or even the applicant himself, cannot control that at this point. It could be controlled in the future, but to what degree? I mean, this won't be serviced by the police to maintain clear lanes. So that's something that I believe it's a tough standard to meet, to say, if we have a rogue car traveling, which will happen, because we'll definitely have tenants, we'll definitely have employees that we can't get apparatus around. I understand the concern. It's a very difficult position for an applicant to be in to try to work around that, because then you're going above and beyond the ordinance. Like I said, would be my opinion on it. But I do understand, Mr. Gott, 100%, we're talking about fire safety here. I mean, that's not to take lightly, so.
And if there's if widening of the aisle is something that the board wants, the applicant's going to have to consider pinching the building in. It's really a function of how wide you think makes it work.
I think if we were going to have that conversation, I would say we should have it on the east side to make the east side more usable, because then I wouldn't be talking about the west side. And I didn't want to say that, but to me, that is the issue. If it's the building that's causing this problem, it's not the width of the roadway, it's not the number of vehicles. You've put a building that seems the absolute biggest possible building that could fit in this parcel, and I understand why you're doing that. I get that, and I'm not asking you to make the building any smaller, but that's the condition that's caused the issues that I'm concerned about. So I don't know how you're going to satisfy me with that. I just don't see that that's an adequate, and I'm only one guy, so, but I just don't see it. I personally think it's too big of a building for adequate fire department response issues because of the other characteristics that are here, specifically these wire issues. So I think if you put all that together, that's why I'm having a problem with it.
it's your fire department response. I'm going to defer to what you feel comfortable responding to, especially to a warehouse fire.
If I could, one of the things the board may wish to consider is the applicant is actually seeking a front yard setback variance. So while I understand it doesn't directly play into what you're saying, but, you know, the board maybe wants to hear the criteria associated with why is that? I think they had testified at the prior hearing that they were going to do an analysis of existing buildings to see if this setback was in keeping. But in fact, if they complied with this setback, I think just by virtue of the constraints of the property, the building would have to get smaller as well. I don't know that they could fit it just by shifting it back due to some environmental constraints to the rear.
Okay.
Thank you. Forgot
So,
about that.
so I'm in this area where I personally feel a little uncomfortable being the only one having this conversation because I happen to be a planning board member and I happen to be a fire chief. So for full transparency, I have had this conversation with several of the members of my fire department, and with all due respect to Chief Lewis, and we've had some conversations about this, what the role of Chief Lewis is when it comes to these. We went through it on a recent previous application as well. So I don't want to be the only person on the record that's asking these questions because I'm not the only, the Ramtown Fire Company is not a member of a company of one guy, right? So depending on how far we get through this, I actually would like some comments or the opportunity to bring this back to others besides me to validate if my concerns are the concerns of other people.
And one suggestion, and we didn't know how to approach this, but now that you mention it, the applicant, through its professionals, not the applicant, would be willing to meet. We would like to meet with the fire department and your department and see if we can come up with an answer to satisfy you. That would, it's easier than going through this slow torture, no offense.
Yeah, and I'm not trying to do that. And I don't want to make you have to keep doing this, but I don't do this. If you've seen me up here, I rarely do this. So, but this one hits me. So,
so that would be great. We would love to meet. We just don't know how to go about doing that. The other thing, while we're here, because Laura raises another interesting point that we were hoping she wouldn't raise, but she did. Mr. Ward, you actually did look at the front yard setbacks of the other buildings on the street, and there aren't that many.
Not many.
And this front yard setback is much closer to the road than any of the other setbacks.
Yeah, so Mr. Vandenkoy had actually offered that up as a comment at the last meeting, and so we did look at it, and we looked at it from an aerial perspective, and if you look, particularly on the north side of Randolph Road, all of the buildings are generally in a 50 to 60 foot setback, which is consistent with the ordinance. We're requesting a front yard setback here, so at that point, you know, the applicant and the team made a decision that that was enough of research.
So the end result is that, and we were going to revise the plans before this meeting and eliminate the front yard setback request. That would reduce the size of the building, would give us extra parking spaces because we don't need as many. But we wanted to at least get through all these other points so we understand where we are in fire. And if we can meet with the fire company, come back with a revised plan to deal with eliminating the front yard setback and address other comments, I think we could maybe have a cleaner presentation and not get bogged down in other issues.
Okay.
The front yard setback, I actually acknowledge that. The thing we're missing in the conversation is, even though there's no other buildings on Randolph Road that are that close to the road, we don't have buildings that are 40 feet tall. So even though it's closer to the road, the height of the building creates another obstacle for us. So again, that's all part of the same conversation. So I just want to make sure that we have full access, that we can protect the residents and people who are going to occupy this building, and I don't want to be the person to say that. I don't think it's fair to you, and I don't think it's fair to the board to be the only one to mention that, because we're getting into some very specific issues here.
Sure. And I just want to make it known again, just so it hasn't been lost. The parapet that was proposed is only on that front side now.
Yep.
So the eve height on all the west and the east side is 24 feet. Having the water service to the property is much better for, you know, in my opinion as well, so that helps. with sprinkling, we don't have to worry about all that other
No doubt,
hoorah.
yep, that's a
So
huge
there
issue.
have been some points in progress made to help with the fire issue, and I know there's still more to get to, which is
Okay.
fine.
So the question is, and that's really all the engineering we have tonight. We do have traffic. I don't know if you want to hear traffic, because I know that was an issue for some of the members of the public, and then we would have to come back after we meet with the fire company and revise the plans.
I have a question on an engineering side, if it's okay.
Yeah, sure.
So on the planned southwest corner of the building, in regards to your lighting plan C401,
Yes.
is it my understanding that the light fixtures that will be used to illuminate the loading dock areas will be more of a forward throw type of design in order to get that light past that 50-foot mark?
You're on the loading dock side?
Yeah,
So that-
closest to the wall. My concern is I believe that it's a forward throw type of fixture, and my concern is people coming west on Randolph Wall Road maybe having some glare issues.
Okay.
And I wondered if you could provide some testimony to that.
What we have, in terms of glare, these are all down fixtures, so they're LED fixtures. I'm trying to think the easiest way to describe this, but if you're looking at them, if you're on the same plane vertically with the fixture, all the light goes down from the fixture. There's no projection from the building, I guess, horizontal to the light fixture, right? So it all comes down at an angle. For glare on Randolph Road, we have very little spillage off of that one fixture to Randolph Road. We have limitations with the plantings that we can plant in that area. I believe, let me just check the landscaping plan. That fixture itself that you mentioned, Chairman, is about 60 feet off of actually probably a little more off of the traveled way on Randolph Road. It might be 75, 80 feet. So, we didn't do any analysis of what that glare could be, but I would say due to the distance of that fixture, I don't think we're going to have a glare issue. But again, you could just tell by the lighting design that from that particular fixture, there's very little spillage onto Randolph.
But we could look at it more carefully.
Are you guys proposing any type of canopy over the loading dock area?
No canopy.
No canopies.
Yeah, there's no projection on that
Just-
side of the building, I guess is the...
I have a little bit of a concern. Maybe a pole in that island with the light fixture pointing towards the back, maybe a better idea with a house side shield on the back side, maybe.
On that, just to the south of where you're talking, right?
Yeah, just move
Okay.
that little island just to the south corner of the building. Maybe something you need to study.
Sure, and that's something we can look at, and, we're trying to limit, in line with JCP&L's request, the number of poles, but adding one more light pole fixture would not be an issue, at least in our estimation with JCP&L. So we could definitely explore that to make sure we get the adequate coverage
Okay.
with the house side shield.
And then the only other comment for things to maybe bring back for the next time we see you is if you are going to get a water service now, does New Jersey American Water require the above-ground backflow prevention device put into that hot box? And if that's the case, the board may want to see what that looks like on the site.
We'll get more details. I know based on the line that we would be extending from, there would be some sort of pressure reduction required because it is such a, I believe, I'm not sure the technical term, I believe it's a transmission line. So we can get more details from the water provider.
Because that box may be pretty large, they may want to opine on it. Those are all my comments. So we want to continue and hear the traffic engineer at this,
Thank you.
please.
Can I introduce John Ray as our traffic expert?
Mr. Ray, do you swear or affirm that the testimony provided before the board this evening will be the truth?
I do.
Spell your first and last name and provide your business address.
John Ray, R-E-A, principal with McDonough and Ray Associates, 1431 Lakewood Road, Manasquan, New Jersey.
Mr. Ray, would you place your credentials on the record, please? I know you've testified before this board, but just for the complete record, as a traffic engineer.
Sure.
please.
I'm a licensed professional engineer in the state of New Jersey. My specialty is traffic engineering. I have 44 years' experience in the traffic engineering field, an undergraduate degree in civil engineering and a master's degree in transportation engineering, and I've testified before many planning and zoning boards throughout the state of New Jersey.
Great, thank you. We'll accept your credentials.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Ray, we asked you to analyze not only the parking, on-site circulation, but also the access way and then traffic aspects related to Randolph Road, and you
Correct.
prepared a report and did a study and came to some conclusions.
I did.
Would you describe those for the board?
Sure. The intersection of Randolph Road and County Route 547 is an unsignalized T-intersection under current conditions. Based on our traffic counts and our analysis of that intersection, it is operating today as an unsignalized intersection at what we call level of service F conditions during the afternoon peak hour, essentially meaning that there are pretty lengthy delays for motorists on Randolph Road attempting to enter Route 547. There's substantial queuing. Level of service F clearly is not a good condition. It's something that needs to be addressed. We took it a step further, and we did a traffic signal warrant analysis. We did a full-day traffic count at the intersection, and what we found was that under existing conditions, a traffic signal is warranted for the intersection of Randolph Road and County Route 547. We've contacted the county, and they have told us that they have no current plans to install a traffic signal at that location. So it appears as though the burden of paying for the traffic signal will likely fall upon the property owners and developers along Randolph Road, and we're one of them. There are other properties along Randolph Road, and there may be other applications that come in front of the board, the planning board, shortly. And so essentially what needs to happen here is the developers who develop property along Randolph Road are going to have to pay their fair share for the installation of the traffic signal. Clearly that burden will be something that this applicant has to share as well. And there needs to be a cost-sharing formula developed for the installation of the traffic signal. But the signal is warranted under existing conditions, and my understanding is we've agreed to pay our fair share for the installation of the traffic signal. Outside of that, the balance of the plan, as Mr. Ward has testified to, I believe the internal circulation works properly and safely. He's testified to the fact that he's run the turning radius templates for the various design vehicles through the site. I concur with him that those movements can be made, and sight distance at the two driveways to Randolph Road is good, so I do not anticipate any sight distance issues with traffic entering and exiting the site from Randolph Road. Again, the big ticket item and the parking, of course, under the current proposal with the breakdown of office and warehouse space, we do have adequate parking under your ordinance. We're actually going to have a little bit of a surplus now, as Mr. Ward indicated. If we adhere to the front yard setback and the building gets smaller, we'll probably have a surplus of parking. So on balance, the big ticket item here, the thing that we need to discuss and how it gets handled is the installation of the traffic signal at Randolph Road and Route 547.
All right, and under the case law and the municipal land use law, off-site traffic conditions are not a justification for a denial of an application, but the board and the town does have the power to require the applicant to pay its fair share. I know your ordinance has actually a specific section that deals with how the fair share is calculated, and as part of a developer's agreement, typically with the town, that fair share calculation is made, and then the contribution is made to the town towards that off-site improvement if it's ever constructed. And the applicant, by law, has to do that and is certainly prepared to do it.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions?
Two questions. So does all of the analysis that you did on the traffic counts getting to the intersection of Randolph and 547, does that assume that every vehicle entering and leaving the building would go to that intersection, meaning that none of them would traverse east on Randolph Road?
I assume the distribution of 85% towards Route 547 and 15% towards the east on Randolph Road.
And can you just tell me what that 15% equates to? How many vehicles, trips per day, hour, however you define?
I can give you the peak hour numbers. During the peak hour in the morning, there would be 15 vehicles entering from the east on Randolph Road and 2 vehicles exiting. During the afternoon peak hour, 2 vehicles entering and 16 vehicles exiting towards the east. So roughly 20 additional vehicles to the east on Randolph Road.
And a vehicle could be a car or a truck?
Could be either.
Okay. There's a lot of concern of residents in this area. I've heard it about this application as well as you've acknowledged that there's other development going on here.
Yes.
I get the sense that many residents are not very thrilled with the idea that additional trailers could wind up going on Randolph Road away from 547. Is there anything that we can do to maybe prevent that to some degree? Maybe restrict some entrances or exits from the building to promote, to discourage vehicles from going the other way?
Understood. There are other industrial properties along Randolph Road, and there are other uses that generate truck traffic that use Randolph Road, so I'm not sure it would be fair to single out one user along Randolph Road and say, your trucks can't go east on Randolph Road when the other users have trucks that are heading east on Randolph Road. What the town, I think, always has the power to do, and Police Chief may agree with this, is the town can always establish a weight limit restriction on Randolph Road, and then everybody has to adhere to it. I mean, I think you have the power to do that. That's the only way I can really answer that.
I think we've talked about that before, right? Didn't we? Isn't that the conversation about Arnold and all that stuff, that we weren't able to do that before?
It would affect Arnold Steel and any other industrial users as well.
Okay. Okay.
His estimate is correct about the 550.
Right. Okay. I'm just trying to respond to.
Understood.
Okay.
I was here when the room was packed for the resource recovery
Yep.
hearing, and I heard the same concerns multiplied by 100 times. So
Okay.
I understand.
But the reality is this is a commercially. It's a commercially zoned area, and we would expect additional traffic if that is the zoning for this area. I get that, but, okay. There was another question I had. Don't remember what it was.
Okay, any other questions?
That concludes tonight's presentation. I don't know if you open to the public tonight or if we wait till we finish the application. We're going to have to obviously come back.
We'll just ask a question. Do we want to open up to the public in case the public has any questions or comments that may affect the applicant's revisions?
Yeah, I think we should, just in
That-
case a
that way
question
they-
comes up, yeah.
Okay, all right. All right, we'll open up the public portion of the meeting. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to come up, state your name clearly into the microphone. You have a question? Come on up.
We don't bite.
Yeah, we don't bite.
I actually came here just to listen to learn how everything works, so I'm not a speaker, I don't know anything, and I have no knowledge, and I'm not educated.
It's fine, ask questions, you're
So my name is-
entitled.
My name is Pamela, who do I address?
You have to pull the mic close to you.
My name is Pamela Newmere. I happen to live around that area.
Could you please tell us your address?
141 Arnold Boulevard.
And counsel, do you need to swear in?
Is she going to be asking questions or giving testimony?
Giving testimony?
I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just concerned because if there's depending on the type of building it is, and as I mentioned, trucks, with the study, I do agree that Randolph Road would need a light at 547 because you can't get in and out. And as far as parking, I didn't even look over these plans. I had no idea what the meeting was going to be about tonight. I just thought I would.
Okay.
There's another meeting that I want to attend, so I came here to preliminarily see how things worked. But the building right there at the corner of 547 and Randolph Road, I know for a fact they double park all the time. There's not enough parking in that facility. And it seemed like years ago, it was, parking lot was empty. I've lived on that street 30 years, and now the parking lot is double packed. You can't get through it. If you even wanted to cut through sometimes, you have to wait for someone to move their car. That's just an instant. But the trucks leaving going toward Brook Road, or that's Oak Glen, right? That's Oak Glen, and it turns into Brook Road. That little corner there, I don't know if you did a study on that corner, and because that corner starts to get backed up. I know the trucks from the tree, there's some type of tree dirt facility there that makes dirt out of trees, and their trucks all head toward 547, most of them, because I travel those roads all the time.
Okay.
But I was just wondering how the traffic was going toward Brook Road, since that is now beginning to get backed up. Brook Road and Lakewood Allenwood Road, that little corner.
You're correct. Just to address your concern, you're correct. Randolph Road first intersects Oak Glen Road, and then Oak Glen Road, in a short distance later, intersects with Brook Road and Lakewood Allenwood Road, and that intersection really needs some geometric improvements. The thought process here is that as the other properties along Randolph Road further to the east get developed, hopefully in accordance with the town zoning, that the east end of Randolph Road will be studied in more detail, and improvements will be recommended for those intersections. But I understand your concern. I come through that intersection on a regular basis. It needs some geometric improvements. I'm not sure we meet traffic signal warrants, but geometrically, we need to get traffic organized a little bit better so they know where they should be,
Because I
and
was...
things of that nature. Yes.
I was just thinking that the traffic from this place, of course, I don't know what's going to be in there, would more than likely want to take the shortcut,
Well,
down Brook Road, that's all. But
Route 547 goes up to 195 and towards Route 34, and I do firmly believe that given our location closer to Route 547, that this particular application, a substantial percentage of the traffic will be oriented in that direction, but some traffic will go to the east. I understand that.
That's it?
Yeah, that's it.
Well, thank you for coming up.
How far do you study that? If 15 vehicles on peak could be turning left and going towards Oak Glen Road, do you figure how many would turn left on Oak Glen to go back to 547 versus right to head towards Brook?
At some point, we would, but the reason why, for this particular application, we didn't go out to the east and study those intersections. As I indicated, we're looking at about 20 peak hour trips heading in that direction, and the typical threshold that's used by the DOT, by the ITE, and the county for when you need to study an intersection is when you add 100 trips to an intersection. It's my expectation that when the east end of Randolph Road, when a development application comes in for those properties, that those projects will add 100 peak hour trips to that intersection, and it will have to be studied in detail at that point in time.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's the way it works, basically.
How many vehicle, trucks, not passenger cars, but how many trucks do you anticipate coming in and out of the site on a daily basis?
It really depends on the tenant. What the ITE has done is they've looked at the percentage of truck traffic that general industrial buildings generate during peak hours, and it ranges from 10 to 20% of the total traffic. During peak hours would be truck traffic, the rest would be employees, passenger vehicles. So of those 20 trips, it could be anywhere between 2 and 4 trucks during a peak hour.
Okay. And I was going to get to this question eventually, but this is probably the right time to ask this. So So from a tenant standpoint, I know we've had some conversations about that. And I know you can't do that in totality because of whatever we're defining flex space as, but can you offer any thoughts on what type of vehicles or what types of deliveries these would be? Would these be expected to be full trailer distributions, or is this a UPS-sized vehicle coming in, dropping off a pallet load of product and leaving there, and 5 minutes later, another one comes in?
It's really impossible, unless John can offer something.
Well,
We have,
the only way I can answer that question, and Pat can confirm this, the loading docks have been designed for a tractor-trailer. That doesn't necessarily mean that all of these tenants will have tractor-trailer deliveries, but they've been designed to accommodate a tractor-trailer. But it could very well be that the tenants will only have single-unit trucks, depending upon the nature of the business.
Okay.
And just to clarify, it was previously testified that the end unit would not accommodate a
correct.
tractor-trailer.
That's correct.
correct.
Okay, we have anybody else from the public that'd like to come up and speak? Please speak your name and your address.
Kathy Novak, 16 Stratton Drive. This is just a general question for the planning board. I heard that there'll be other applications coming before you for Randolph Road, and we all know about the existing one that's sort of in limbo right now with the waste transfer station. And I was wondering, do you have to decide each case in isolation of one another, or you have the knowledge of what's the potential for the waste transfer station and the impact that will have on Randolph Road with trucks coming and going and traffic? And is this case in isolation of all the ones that you know may be coming before you?
Good question. I'll let our professionals handle that one.
Well, just generally speaking, ultimately, the town has a master plan and zoning, and this fits within the zoning of our ordinance, this type of use. When you talk about the transfer station, that's actually governed under the county SWAC system, so the local board does not have jurisdiction on that. And as you're aware, I believe the township has lodged some efforts on that application, but it's not something that would ever be before this board. When you have professionals that come forward and they look at information, they look at build conditions, so like when we're talking about traffic. The analysis is going to include future development consistent with our zoning ordinance. So those type of things are considered when we do analysis for traffic perspective, even water, sewer, all of those type of things, they're included. But each application has to stand on its own merits. So they're each individually reviewed, analyzed, and a decision is made.
Ms. Newman, is it fair to say that as we approve applications or as development continues to grow, the next applicant has more data to review? Because we've got traffic counts now, we got new traffic counts, and everything else is associated.
Well, yes, but they're also required to project out 10 years, I believe in their study, 10 or 15 years in a traffic study of the build volumes,
Okay.
which takes into account, and we've seen this on other applications, where other things have to be considered in traffic reports, as well as projecting build of vacant parcels or redevelopment of parcels.
Great, thank you.
So if the Arnold Steel property, for example, was to be developed with a proposal, that developer would have to provide a traffic study which would show the aggregate effect of his project as well as anything else that would be existing, which could be this site?
That is correct, but as was indicated, the threshold is when you hit that 100-trip mark. But yes, it would have to consider surrounding areas and those impacts on those intersections, absolutely.
So I guess the one that you're asking about specifically would be the transfer station, which Ms. Newman explained, but I think it's also worth noting that if that was to occur, and again, it's not within our jurisdiction, but if it was, that would not be built or approved without that signalization, correct? Wasn't that a key component of it?
You're talking about the transfer station?
Right.
So the transfer station, I believe there's county comments as it relates to that, but they have the same threshold. I mean, development regulations for SWAC are a little bit different than they are here, but they have to meet the same thresholds.
Okay.
Ms. Duffy, if I can just add to what former Mayor Dodd said. When he said this board has jurisdiction, there's a planning board and a zoning board. Planning boards only consider applications for uses that are permitted by the town zoning. So what that means with respect to traffic is that the town has decided that this particular property should be a warehouse industrial use. Therefore, any impacts this project may have off the property, the town has already factored that into its thinking by permitting it. If this use was not permitted in this zone, the zoning board would be hearing it, not the planning board, and the zoning board would have every right to ask that use variance applicant, explain to us how you're not going to mess up the intersections all surrounding it's a much higher burden, a much higher standard. But here, this is a permitted use. So the traffic, what Mr. Rea is really focusing on is whether it's safe to get in and off the site. He's not, although he did testify as to what's happening off track, that was really for the board's kind of information for future signalization. But this would be a much more intense issue if this was before the zoning board.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, does anybody else from the public have any comments? Seeing none, we'll close the public portion of the meeting.
Thank you. So,
Ferry, would you like to...
we just need a new date, and then how we get in touch with your fire department.
Yeah, so I guess I just need to ask, obviously, I could pick up the phone and talk to 5 people in the fire company, right, and meet the same thing, but am I allowed to do that, or does it need to be official?
You know, ordinarily, a planning board member who's voting shouldn't be having ex parte meetings and conversations with the applicant.
Okay.
And I know Ron feels very strongly about maintaining a separation. You'd be putting on a different hat as part of that meeting, and we'd pretty much be looking for Mr. Alfieri to kind of tell us if he has any concerns with Firm Mayor Gatto meeting with your client as part of his capacity as a fire official.
No, we actually welcome it because we need to address the fire concerns, and there'll be other members of the fire company
That's
there
correct.
as well, so it's not just former Mayor Gatto giving his opinion, so we have no issue with it.
But then subsequent to the meeting, at the next public hearing of this board, both the applicant and former Mayor Gatto would then explain exactly what took place.
Yes, we'll summarize
Yeah.
exactly what was discussed.
Thank you.
Okay. So then I'll certainly bring it back to my organization, but I would request that let's follow the formal process and please send a letter, and I'll tell you who it should be sent to, so it comes from somebody other than me. I don't want to be the person responsible for, or maybe it's Mr. Alfieri, whoever it is. I don't want to be the one to formally be the contact.
And you may want to have, sorry, Laura, you may want to have someone from CME present at that meeting as well, just so you have a township official there.
That's fine.
Okay.
So the question is, you want me to send a letter to Eileen requesting contact information to arrange the meeting? Is that the easiest way to do it?
I'll leave it to you guys to,
Okay.
That's fine.
I don't want to be the official person to be the scheduler or the coordinator. I don't think that would be appropriate.
No, I'll email you and you give me a name and then I'll forward Sal's letter to that person.
I'll give it to you tonight.
Okay, and then we just need a date to carry this to.
How far out do you want to go?
Well, if you figure we're going to need a couple weeks to get a meeting scheduled and then potentially a week or so to get a meeting scheduled, and then we're going to need a little time to revise plans.
I have
So-
June 21st or July 19th.
Pat, you're the guy who has to do the work, so.
And I'll need an extension of time as well.
Yes, that's no problem. June 21st or what?
July 19th. We only have one meeting in
Just-
July.
Again, I feel really weird about even suggesting this, but we're available next Tuesday night. I mean, we meet, and
Oh,
the people that need to see this would be there.
That's the 15th.
Yeah, that's our night, so, but we can figure that out.
I'd like to see, if we can meet next week, I think we can make the June meeting
okay.
work. I guess if we can't make the June meeting work, we'll have to, we'll carry it to
carry.
July.
So June 21st?
Yes.
Okay.
And you're going Sal, your plan's going to extend the time of decision till what time?
We'll extend it through the end of July, just in case we have to carry. And do you want it by letter or the extension, or on the record it's enough?
On the record's fine.
Okay, so the applicant consents to the app board having through the end of July to act on this application, and then we'll just ask that it be announced, the new meeting date, and no further notice being required.
So we're going to make a public announcement. Application case number SP-1027, 41 Randolph LLC, is being carried on notice to the board's regularly scheduled meeting, June 21st, 7 p.m., this room. By saying it's carried on notice, meaning there'll be no further mail notice and will not be published in the newspaper. So June 21st, 7 p.m., this room.
Thank you, thank you. What time do you need on?
Have a good day.
I'll make a phone call right now.
Okay, so we'll take 5 minutes? Okay. 5-minute break.
The board will now reconvene.
Did I hit my gavel? Meeting's back in session. Okay. The last thing on the agenda is to review the resolution for case number SP-1039.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to memorialize the resolution granting preliminary and final major site plan approval for case number SP-1039 with the stipulation that I respectfully ask for the record of the vote of the approval that night to be included in this specific resolution only.
Okay. Maybe we have a second?
You're the only other eligible
Oh.
member.
Oh, sorry. I'm looking at the sheet. Sorry, it's late. Okay, I'll second.
Roll call. Mr.
Yes.
Former Mayor Gatto
Yes.
and Chairman Tannenhouse.
Yes.
Resolutions memorialized. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. We now have a master plan status report, but it looks like we're getting some legs. There was some talk about getting CME involved. Do we have any reason to go into executive session? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Yeah.
Aye.